When a family lives its life in isolation for decades, the outside world becomes a myth, something heard about but never truly seen. For the Whittakers of Odd, West Virginia, that world not only came crashing in, it stayed. Cameras, visitors, donations, and speculation flooded their once quiet lives. What started as fascination has now turned into fracture. Today, the Whittaker family stands at crossroads. Their world, built on resilience and routine, is falling apart in ways few could have predicted. Relationships are strained, loyalties are questioned, and those who once claimed to be helping them are now under fire. This isn't just a story about poverty anymore. It's about trust, betrayal, and survival. It began, as so many stories do in the digital age, with good intentions. Filmmaker Mark Lytas' first encounter with the Whittakers was raw, intimate, and profoundly human. His videos captured a family unlike any other, living deep in the hills of Appalachia, speaking in fragmented sounds, yet expressing a kind of purity that shook the internet. Viewers were stunned. Some were compassionate, others were cruel. But regardless of intent, the Whittakers became a global phenomenon overnight. And that's where the problems began. The influx of attention brought with it a flood of outsiders, creators, fundraisers, journalists, and self-proclaimed advocates, all drawn by the same question. Who are the Whittakers, really? For some, it was curiosity. For others, it was profit. Soon, money started circulating, donations, GoFundMe pages, merchandise sales, and ad revenue from countless videos using the Whittaker name. But the family, for all the fame and fortune surrounding them, saw little of it. As the months went on, whispers began to grow louder. Where's the money? Who's managing it? Why isn't the family situation improving? It wasn't just speculation, it was outrage. Betty, the matriarch of the family, became the center of attention once again, not for her resilience, but for her silence. Viewers wanted answers. Supporters demanded accountability. But how could she explain something she didn't fully understand? Those who visited the family described confusion. Betty spoke of promises that never materialized, of cars being given and taken back, of helpers who stopped returning calls. It wasn't exploitation in the traditional sense. It was chaos, layered with miscommunication and a lack of transparency. To the Whittakers, the digital world didn't make sense. They couldn't follow the accusations, the live stream debates, or the online fundraising wars. They were simply trying to live. But the internet wasn't done with them. At the heart of the storm were two men, Patrick and Eric. Patrick had presented himself as a friend and advocate, someone who stepped in to help with day-to-day needs when Mark Lytas wasn't around. He brought groceries, fixed things around the property, and seemed genuinely invested in the family's well-being. Eric, on the other hand, emerged later, offering a different kind of support, more organized, more polished, and in some ways more ambitious. He set up fundraisers, spoke publicly about helping the Whittakers get medical care, and even talked about rebuilding parts of their home. But when the money began to flow, the unity began to crumble. Allegations surfaced that funds weren't reaching the family. Patrick accused Eric of mishandling money. Eric countered that Patrick was manipulating the situation. And in the middle of it all, the Whittakers, the very people all of this was supposed to help, were left in the dark. The public picked sides. The internet became a courtroom. What makes this tragedy so painful is that it's not new. History is filled with examples of the poor and vulnerable being pulled into power struggles between those who claim to help them. But this time, the stage wasn't a courtroom or a charity. It was YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Reddit. Millions of viewers became jurors. Rumors became headlines. And the truth, whatever it was, got buried under opinion. Every live stream, every screenshot, every exclusive update chipped away at what little piece the family had left. The once gentle fascination with their way of life had turned into a public dissection of their pain. Behind the scenes, Betty tried to hold everything together. She's a woman who has endured loss most people couldn't imagine. Parents gone too soon, siblings with disabilities, a lifetime of poverty and stigma. For years, she kept her family together with nothing but love and determination. But now she's tired. The stress of the ongoing investigations, the social media battles, and the constant scrutiny have worn her down. Neighbors say she doesn't talk much anymore, that her once warm smile has faded into quiet resignation. The state's involvement only made things harder. Officials reportedly told her she had 30 days to fix problems on her property, septic issues, safety concerns, and more, or risk being removed. For Betty, that wasn't just a threat to her home. It was a threat to her identity. This land, these hills, they're her world. They're where she raised her family. To take that away would be to erase everything she's fought for. Meanwhile, Patrick and Eric continue to battle. Not just each other, but public perception. Patrick insists he's being unfairly vilified. He says he's done nothing but try to help the family, even using his own money to do so. His defenders argue that he's been scapegoated because he's outspoken, emotional, and sometimes impulsive. Eric, however, positions himself as the responsible one, the man trying to fix the damage others caused. But critics accuse him of distancing himself at the worst possible time, leaving the Whittakers to fend for themselves while legal and financial questions swirl. To the outside observer, it's almost impossible to know who's telling the truth. Both sides have receipts, messages, and witnesses. Both sides have loyal supporters. And both sides have made mistakes. What's clear is that the family is suffering because of it. The once united effort to help the Whittakers has splintered into factions. Some viewers have stopped watching altogether, disgusted by the drama. Others double down, defending their favorite creator like fans defending a celebrity. There are long comment threads, late-night live stream arguments, and endless speculation about who did what. But the question that matters most has been lost. How are the Whittakers doing right now? Are they safe? Are they healthy? Do they have food, heat, dignity? No one seems to have answers. Because while the internet argues, the family's world continues to crumble, quietly, out of sight, just as it once was before the world found them. The tragedy of the Whittakers isn't just their poverty or isolation. It's that they became symbols instead of people. To some, they're an example of genetic inbreeding. To others, they're a story about poverty in Appalachia. But to themselves, they're simply family, one that's now being torn apart by forces far beyond their control. It's a cruel irony that the same curiosity that once brought them hope now threatens to destroy them. For years, people said they need help. Now those same people are asking, was helping them the worst thing we could have done? That's the question hanging in the air as Thanksgiving approaches, as winter closes in, as Betty looks out over the same hills that have watched her struggle her entire life. She's not thinking about YouTube views, fan pages, or fundraisers. She's thinking about keeping her family together. And that, more than anything, may be the one thing she's in danger of losing. Because when the noise dies down and the cameras stop rolling and the online debates fade, one truth remains. The Whittakers didn't ask for any of this. They didn't ask to be famous, to be pitted, or to become the subject of internet controversy. All they ever wanted was to live quietly, together, in the only home they've ever known. But now that home and that family is hanging by a thread. And the question we all have to face is simple, painful, and urgent. Are we watching the end of the Whittakers' story? Or are we just watching the world turn its back again? Comment below. Do you believe there's still hope for the Whittaker family to rebuild their lives and find peace? Or has the internet taken too much from them already? The silence around Odd, West Virginia, isn't the kind that brings peace anymore. It's the kind that follows chaos. After months of arguments, accusations, and betrayal, the Whittaker family's story has become less about compassion and more about conflict. What began as an effort to help has spiraled into a bitter feud, leaving their fragile world hanging by a thread. Online, supporters are divided. In the real world, the family is fractured. And in between, there's nothing but confusion. If you ask people close to the situation, they'll tell you the same thing. Nobody really knows what's true anymore. One side claims the Whittakers were manipulated and deceived. The other says they were protected and cared for. Somewhere in the middle lies a painful truth, a family that has been pushed into the spotlight and torn apart by it. The controversy has turned into a full-blown saga. Live streamers debate it nightly. Commenters analyze every screenshot, every message, every photograph. Private conversations are leaked. Videos are reposted and dissected like evidence in a trial that never ends. But what gets lost in all the noise are the very people at the center of it, the Whittakers themselves. Betty, once the steady voice of the family, has become quieter. Those who've seen her recently describe her as distant, worried, even afraid. The home that once echoed with laughter and the hum of everyday life now feels hollow. Her days are spent trying to make sense of things she never asked to understand: lawyers, court dates, and social services. Her phone rings constantly, but fewer and fewer of those calls bring good news. To the outside world, it looks like the Whittakers have vanished. But behind that silence is exhaustion, the kind that comes from being pulled in too many directions by people who all claim to know what's best for you. The online divide grew sharper when Patrick, one of the family's longtime supporters, posted a series of emotional messages claiming he'd been set up and lied about. He insisted he never stole from the family, never exploited them, and never intended harm. In his mind, he was the only one who truly cared, the one who showed up when no one else would. But others saw it differently. Screenshots surfaced suggesting Patrick had taken control of donations meant for the Whittakers. There were claims he'd used their name for personal fundraising, that he'd blurred the line between friend and guardian. In some circles, he became a symbol of betrayal. In others, he became a martyr, a man destroyed by rumors and mob mentality. The truth, as usual, is somewhere in between. Then there was Eric, the calm, businesslike figure who'd once appeared to bring structure to the chaos. For a while it worked. He organized fundraisers, coordinated with professionals, and spoke publicly about accountability. But that composure didn't last. As pressure mounted, Eric began to pull back. He posted less, avoided interviews, and stopped answering certain questions. People started wondering, was he hiding something or just protecting himself? His silence became fuel for speculation. Some say he walked away because he realized the situation was beyond saving. Others believe he left because he had something to lose. Either way, his departure left a void, one that filled quickly with misinformation and outrage. The worst part of all this isn't the lies or the losses. It's that the Whittakers never had the power to defend themselves. They don't have access to social media in the way others do. They can't live stream or issue statements. Their reality exists in a world of conversations and community whispers, not screens and hashtags. That imbalance between the storytellers and the subjects is what allowed this situation to spiral. When your voice can't reach the people talking about you, rumors become truth by default. Inside Odd, neighbors say the family's home looks more worn than ever. The yard that once had visitors bringing groceries and gifts is now quiet. The local grocery store clerk says Betty hasn't been seen much. Some family members are in state care, others in different homes, and no one seems to know when or if they'll all be together again. It's a cruel twist of fate. The family that the world once wanted to save has now been splintered in the name of saving. People meant to protect them have pulled them apart. There are still a few who visit, quietly, without cameras or fanfare. Volunteers from nearby towns drop off clothes and food. One local pastor reportedly checks in weekly, praying with Betty and offering support. But even good intentions come with complications now. The Whittakers' name has become so tied to scandal that anyone associated with them risks online backlash. People are accused of using them just for posting photos. Donations are questioned. Acts of kindness are dissected for ulterior motives. It's no longer just a story about help. It's a story about suspicion. If you trace it back, you can pinpoint when things began to unravel. It wasn't one moment, but a series of small fractures. A miscommunication here, a disagreement there, promises made and forgotten. Patrick once said in a post, "All I ever wanted was for them to be okay." Maybe that's true. Maybe everyone involved once felt the same. But wanting someone to be okay and knowing how to make that happen are two very different things. In the end, what the Whittakers needed wasn't fame or fundraising. It was guidance. They needed a social worker who could navigate state systems, not a stranger with a camera. They needed privacy, not pity. But that's not what they got. The real tragedy is how preventable it all was. If boundaries had been respected, if communication had been clear, the Whittakers could have been thriving right now. They could have had a rebuilt home, medical support, steady income, and peace. Instead, they're back where they started. Only this time, everyone knows their names. That's the cruel paradox of internet fame. It gives visibility, but steals stability. The same audience that once sent them groceries now sends gossip. The same creators who once filmed their kindness now film their downfall. And the same voices who cried for justice now argue about who's to blame. The pain is spreading beyond the family now. Patrick's supporters are feuding with Eric's. Former donors are demanding refunds. Even local residents are tired of the attention, frustrated that their quiet town has become a global spectacle. One resident said, "We just want them to be left alone. They've been through enough." That sentiment echoes across Appalachia, a region long used to being misunderstood, misrepresented, and exploited for stories that outsiders profit from. The Whittakers have become another symbol of that. But for all the chaos, there's still something unbroken, a small ember of humanity that refuses to die. Betty's love for her family, the loyalty of a few honest neighbors, the compassion of people who don't post their kindness online. These are the threads holding their world together. And perhaps if the noise ever dies down long enough, those threads might weave something new, something stronger, quieter, truer. Still, the question remains, is this the end? When you look at the state of things, the infighting, the accusations, the loneliness, it's hard not to think so. The Whittaker story feels like it's closing, not continuing. But endings aren't always final. Sometimes they're a pause, a painful, necessary stillness before something new can begin. Maybe this is that moment for the Whittakers. Maybe this is where the world finally learns to stop consuming and start caring. Because if there's one thing this saga has shown us, it's that the line between help and harm is razor thin. And when that line is crossed, it's almost impossible to repair the damage. But not completely impossible. For now, the hills of Odd remain quiet. No cameras, no chaos, just the sound of wind and time passing. Betty sits on her porch, staring out at the trees that have stood longer than any scandal. She doesn't know what the internet's saying. She doesn't care. What she does know is this: her family has survived worse. And that, perhaps, is the only reason to believe this isn't truly the end. Comment below. Do you think the Whittaker family can ever find peace again? Or has the damage from fame and betrayal gone too far to undo? When you strip away the rumors, the live streams, and the digital noise, what's left of the Whittaker story is painfully simple. A family struggling to survive in a world that refuses to understand them. The chaos that once swirled online is quieted, but only slightly. Underneath that silence, there's tension, the kind that hums just before something breaks. For the Whittakers, that break feels closer than ever. In the beginning, their world was isolated but stable. The hills around West Virginia, had always protected them, from outsiders, from judgment, from change. Generations had lived there, working the land, building lives out of routine and resilience. But fame has a way of finding even the most hidden corners. The first time Mark Lytas visited with his camera, it wasn't to expose, it was to understand. What he found was a family unlike any other, humble, shy, living in a way most couldn't comprehend. The world saw them as odd, but to those who looked closely, they were extraordinary in their endurance. That raw, unfiltered truth was what drew millions of viewers. Yet, it was also the seed of everything that would come later. The fascination, the pity, the exploitation, the money. What began as storytelling turned into ownership. The first crack came when outsiders started showing up. At first, it was well-meaning people, fans who brought food, clothes, and supplies. But over time, visitors began treating the Whittakers like a sideshow. They filmed without permission. They made promises they couldn't keep. They used the family's image for profit or attention, leaving confusion and resentment in their wake. For a family already uncomfortable with attention, this intrusion was devastating. Betty, who had always been the glue holding things together, found herself in an impossible position. She wanted help, but didn't understand the rules of this new world. How money worked online, what contracts meant, or why strangers were arguing over her family's name. In her eyes, help was supposed to make things better. But every new helper brought a new wave of drama. The money became the second crack. As donations poured in through multiple fundraisers and YouTube channels, the question of control became impossible to ignore. Who was managing it? Who was delivering it? And who was benefiting most? Eric claimed transparency. Patrick claimed loyalty. Others claimed both were lying. Viewers began keeping their own ledgers, tracking every public dollar, every receipt shown online. But no one could agree on what was true. And while the internet argued, Betty waited for repairs that never came. The septic system still failed. The roof still leaked. The family's future, once so bright with promise, began to dim again. Those who had once pledged to save, the Whittakers now spent their time fighting each other. Meanwhile, the family's isolation deepened. Timmy, the most recognizable face in the videos, grew anxious whenever outsiders arrived. Kenneth became withdrawn. Larry, once a quiet but sturdy presence, grew sickly. The state eventually stepped in, citing safety concerns and living conditions. Some say it was justified. Others say it was cruel. Either way, it fractured what little stability remained. Neighbors described the day the state arrived as heartbreaking. Officials and cars lining the dirt road, voices raised, Betty standing helplessly on the porch. The family that had survived generations of poverty and stigma was now facing removal from their own land. The 30-day warning about the septic issue became a countdown no one could stop. To the Whittakers, it must have felt like losing everything again. The online world, of course, turned into content. Within hours, videos appeared with titles like "The State Took the Whittakers" and "Exclusive Update: What Really Happened to Betty." Each creator had their own inside source. Each one claimed to have the real story. But few, if any, had actually spoken to Betty. The truth is far more human and far less sensational. The family was never the villains or victims the internet made them out to be. They were simply people trying to survive a storm they didn't start. And when the cameras turned off, the family's world went dark again, quieter, colder, lonelier. Patrick reappeared briefly, insisting he had proof of his innocence. He posted photos of repairs he'd paid for, messages showing his communication with state officials, screenshots of transactions he said went directly to Betty. "Everything I did was for them," he wrote. Everything. But for many, it was too late. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild easily, especially not in front of an audience. For every person who defended him, there were 10 more accusing him of deceit. Even those who once supported him grew tired of the fighting. Meanwhile, Eric's silence continued. His supporters called it professional restraint. His critics called it cowardice. He offered occasional updates about logistics and legal matters, but avoided direct confrontation. The gap between the two men became symbolic, a reflection of the larger divide between those who truly cared and those who cared only for control. Lost in that divide was Betty's voice, the one that mattered most. She never asked for fame. She never sought money or recognition. What she wanted was safety for her family, food on the table, a roof over their heads, peace. Instead, she got chaos. The digital world that once promised salvation had stripped her of privacy, dignity, and ultimately, hope. Even simple acts, like going to town for groceries, became uncomfortable as locals whispered and strangers stared. To them, she wasn't Betty anymore. She was the woman from YouTube, and that label carries weight. Not the kind that lifts you up, but the kind that buries you. It's easy to forget that before all this, the Whittakers lived in quiet obscurity. Their days followed the rhythm of the land, tending the property, caring for one another, surviving with little but pride. Now, that rhythm is gone. Instead, their days are filled with uncertainty, waiting for news from the state, worrying about donations that may never arrive, wondering who's telling the truth. Even those trying to help now face obstacles. Some organizations have stepped back, wary of the controversy. Others say the family is too complicated to assist. It's a cruel irony. The same exposure that brought help has made it nearly impossible to get it now. But amidst the despair, there are moments of grace, fleeting, fragile, but real. A local woman who once watched the videos in secret now brings Betty warm meals. A small group of supporters has started writing physical letters, not emails or comments, to remind the family they're not forgotten. There are whispers that a few volunteers are quietly raising money to fix the septic system themselves, without online announcements or GoFundMe campaigns. They want no credit, no headlines, only resolution. It's not flashy. It's not viral. But it's what real help looks like. If there's a lesson in the Whittakers' fall, it's that visibility without understanding is dangerous. When a story goes viral, it stops belonging to the people it's about. It becomes property to be reshaped, reinterpreted, and resold until the truth no longer matters. For the Whittakers, that process turned their lives into an endless spectacle. Every photo became proof. Every silence became suspicious. Every misstep became evidence. And yet the people making those claims have never walked up that hill, never stood in that yard, never looked Betty in the eyes and seen the pain behind her polite smile. If they had, they'd know this isn't entertainment, it's endurance. As winter approaches, questions hang heavy in the air. Will the state remove them from their home? Will Patrick or Eric step forward with real answers? Will Mark Lytas return to tell the story again? Or has he stepped back for good? No one knows. But one thing is certain. Whatever happens next will define not just the Whittakers' future, but how the world remembers them. Will they be remembered as a family destroyed by exposure, or as survivors who endured even this? That choice might not belong to them anymore. But if there's any justice left in the story, perhaps it will. Because despite everything, they're still here, still standing, still hoping that maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end. Comment below. Do you believe the Whittakers can still recover from the damage done? Or has too much truth, too much exposure, already broken what little piece they had left? The sun sets early in the hollers of West Virginia this time of year. It dips behind the trees before most towns see evening, leaving the hills washed in shadows and silence. And odd, the quiet feels heavier than ever, as if the land itself is holding its breath, waiting for what comes next. For the Whittakers, the last few months have been a test of endurance, not just of poverty or public scrutiny, but of faith in people, in each other, in the idea that things might still get better. But every time a bit of light seems to break through, another storm rolls in. The drama that began online has long since spilled into real life. Supporters have turned on one another. Friends who once worked together now refuse to speak. The same platforms that brought attention to the Whittakers have become battlegrounds of ego, resentment, and misinformation. Videos continue to appear, each one claiming to reveal the truth about the family situation. Some accuse Betty of being manipulated. Others claim she's the manipulator. Some defend Patrick and Eric as misunderstood heroes, while others label them opportunists. And yet, through all this noise, one fact remains. The Whittakers' daily life has not improved. The leaks are still there. The bills still pile up. The uncertainty about the state's involvement still lingers. The people arguing online have moved on to the next controversy. But for the family, this isn't content. It's survival. Betty has become a symbol without intending to. For millions, she represents resilience, the strength to endure when the world insists on misunderstanding you. For others, she's a reminder of how compassion can curdle into obsession when left unchecked. But to those who know her personally, she's still just Betty, the woman who sits on her porch each morning, watching the mist roll through the valley, try to make sense of a life that was never meant to be this public. Those close to her say she's wary of everyone now. Strangers stop by claiming to help, but she's learned that most don't stay long. Some come with cameras, others with empty promises. She thanks them all politely, but her eyes stay guarded. Trust, once a simple thing, has become a luxury she can't afford. The tension between Patrick and Eric continues to cast a long shadow over everything. Patrick, still defensive, insists that he was scapegoated. In interviews and comments, he describes sleepless nights and mounting anxiety. "They turned me into the villain," he said in one recent clip, "when all I ever did was care." His voice cracks when he talks about Betty and the others. There's still affection there, but also pain, the kind that comes from knowing that even good intentions can do harm when mixed with pride and misunderstanding. Eric, meanwhile, has become a ghost in his own story. His once frequent updates about helping the family rebuild have slowed to a trickle. When he does speak, it's in vague statements about ongoing efforts and legal restrictions. Some supporters interpret that as professionalism. Others see it as avoidance. Between them, there's no communication, no reconciliation, just silence, a chasm built on money, mistrust, and what each believes was betrayal. And in that silence, the Whittakers are left stranded. The state's 30-day deadline has long passed, but the threat hasn't disappeared. Local officials continue monitoring the property, citing safety and sanitation concerns. One official, speaking anonymously, admitted, "No one wants to be the one to remove them." But no one wants to take responsibility if something happens, either. It's a heartbreaking bureaucratic limbo, one that traps the family between compassion and compliance. Volunteers have tried to help quietly, raising money to fix the septic system and secure basic repairs. But without clear legal oversight, many are afraid of getting involved. Too many people have already been burned by promises that fell apart under scrutiny. The result? Stagnation. No progress. Just waiting. And waiting in odd feels like dying slow. Every so often, Mark Lytas' name resurfaces, the man who first introduced the world to the Whittakers. His original videos remain online, now with millions of views. They've sparked conversations about poverty, disability, and social responsibility. Some people demand that Mark return to fix what others broke. Others accuse him of starting this spiral to begin with. But the truth is more complicated. Lyta gave the family visibility, yes, but he also gave them dignity. His films treated them as people, not props. The tragedy is that others who came after didn't share that same respect. He once said, "They didn't ask for this. They just want to live." Those words, in hindsight, feel prophetic, because that's all the Whittakers have ever wanted, to live in peace, even if the world doesn't understand what peace looks like for them. Thanksgiving is approaching again, and with it comes a cruel irony. A year ago, promises filled the air, talk of a new home, better conditions, new beginnings. But this year, Betty's table will be smaller. Some family members are gone, others too far to visit. The house will still smell like cooking, but the laughter that once filled the rooms is quieted. There's still gratitude for life, for family, for the little they have, but also grief for what's been lost. Some neighbors plan to bring food. Others will drive by slowly, curious, wondering how much of what they've seen online is true. For them, the Whittakers have become a kind of local legend, a reminder of how quickly kindness can become chaos. For Betty, it's not a story. It's just another winter coming. The internet has moved on. Most of the channels that once posted daily updates about the Whittakers now cover new controversies. The audiences that claim to care have drifted toward fresher scandals. A few faithful viewers still comment, asking if the family is okay, but those voices are drowned out by the noise of algorithms chasing clicks. It's a cycle the digital age knows all too well. Fascination, outrage, exhaustion, abandonment. And through it all, the people left behind are the ones who never asked to be famous in the first place. Yet even in this ending, there's a sliver of hope. Quiet help is still happening. Real, tangible, off-camera compassion. A retired plumber from Beckley fixed a pipe without asking for a dime. A church group from Princeton dropped off firewood. Someone anonymously paid their power bill last month. Small acts, unnoticed by the world, but monumental to those receiving them. Maybe that's what redemption looks like now. Not in grand gestures or viral fundraisers, but in quiet consistency. The kind of help that doesn't need to be seen to be real. If there's one thing the Whittakers have proven, it's that they are survivors. They've endured generations of hardship, poverty, ridicule, loss. They've faced cameras, critics, and now bureaucracy. Yet they remain scarred, yes, but still standing. Maybe this isn't the end of their story after all. Maybe it's the moment before rebirth, when everything collapses so something honest can grow from the wreckage. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't the ones that go viral, but the ones that quietly endure when no one's watching. And perhaps one day when the noise finally fades, people will look back and see the Whittakers not as victims or spectacles, but as what they've always been, a family doing their best with what little they have, in a world that rarely gives them grace. As the night deepens and odd, Betty steps outside one last time. The air is cold, the hills silent except for the wind. She looks toward the road where strangers used to park and film. It's empty now. For the first time in months, she feels something she hasn't felt in a long time. Peace. It's fragile, fleeting, but it's hers. Maybe tomorrow will bring more challenges. Maybe the world will find them again. But tonight there's quiet. And for Betty, for the Whittakers, that's enough. Comment below. Do you think this is truly the end of the Whittakers' public story? Or is there still a chance for them to reclaim their peace and rebuild away from the noise? Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.